All right, last week I teased about which cloud we use, which cloud we prefer. Is it Amazon? Is it Microsoft? Is it Google? Or maybe is it private? Is it all cloud? Is it hybrid? Let's talk about it. It's funny, we've tested a lot of public clouds. So when we're talking about infrastructure, we've tested Amazon AWS, we've tested Google Cloud Platform, and Microsoft Azure. We've tested some private cloud offerings. We've moved a customer into a private cloud offering. We've tried Google Workspace. We obviously work with Microsoft 365. But which cloud overall is best for our customers, is best for our prospects? The company that we feel is the best to standardize most of your cloud on. And I want to bring you the top 5 reasons why we've chose this cloud. And I'll tell you at the end which one it is. I was just kidding. It's Microsoft. And I want to go through the top 5 things why. So number 1 is the interoperability. Now, when we look at Microsoft 365 as a productivity suite, as everything that's included in that platform, and then we look at Microsoft Azure on the other side for infrastructure and for maybe if you want to host your website there or some other things, the interoperability is amazing. The Azure Virtual Desktop that's offered inside of Microsoft Azure is awesome because we can integrate that really well with Microsoft 365. And we can create this ecosystem that is just simple to work with for an end user, creates a beautiful experience. You can work wherever you need to, and you get the performance that you want. So that interoperability between those products is just unmatched in our opinion. Scalability. Look, all cloud platforms that are really good have good scale. You know, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Google, whether it's Microsoft. But for us, the scalability, especially on the networking side, it's just better with Azure. And the reasons for that, there's a few reasons, but we've tested Amazon and we never got quite the networking performance we expected to get. And then Google, they were great, but they just didn't fit well into the other ecosystem. So the scalability for us, we feel is better with Azure. And because of that, it's also, you can be hybrid and scale really well into Azure. And most of our customers are going to work on Windows Server, Windows Desktop, and it just scales really well with the business. So you can choose if you want to be all cloud in Azure, you can do that. You can choose to only have some of your resources in Azure. You can leverage Microsoft 365 with that. And then you can have some servers on site if you really need to. So for us, for the customers that we attract, for the prospects that we want to attract, it's all about scalability, and Microsoft just offers a better way of scaling your business and matching what you need. Number 3 is going to be security. And I'm not saying that Amazon and Google are not secure. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. But from a standpoint of being able to collect data and analyze data and bring it into other systems, as far as a cybersecurity perspective, it's a lot easier for us to do it through Azure than it is for us to do it with the other platforms. And a lot of that's because we can run the workloads next to each other, and we can pull that information either into something like Azure Sentinel, or we can pull it into another product that we have to collect that information. We've ran into problems with Google being really delayed on some of their logging. Now we've seen that with Microsoft too, and Amazon just doesn't offer some of the other things. Like they don't offer like a product like Google Workspace or Microsoft 365. So you're still going to use one of those products with Amazon. So for us, for a small to medium enterprise, it doesn't make sense to do that. Now, there are workloads that work better in Amazon. I'm not going to argue that. There are probably workloads that work better in Google. But for the most part, for the size of customer between small and medium enterprises, and even into larger enterprises, if you're going to go with Microsoft 365, sticking with Azure is actually probably a better play. But again, you can put certain workloads in other clouds. This is not saying that you can't use other clouds, but when we're going to consolidate and use one, that's why we go with the Microsoft piece. And we can pull in the security from both Microsoft 365 and if we have stuff running in Azure all into one portal and have a holistic approach and see all the telemetry. And that's just a distinct advantage that we get from Microsoft. Number 4 is pricing advantages. And this is a big one. This has nothing to do with Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace or anything like that. It has everything to do with Azure and the way that they deal with licensing. Because Microsoft owns Azure, you just get better pricing inside of there when you buy licenses from Microsoft. So when you buy Windows Server licenses or you buy SQL licenses, there are distinct advantages with using them in Azure versus the other cloud platforms, and that's by design. You may not like that. A lot of people in the industry don't like that, but the reality is that's the case. And when you couple that with Azure Virtual Desktop, which is really a way to run Windows 10 or Windows 11 in a multi-session environment, so meaning you could put like 10 people on your team on one server and they get the Windows 10 or Windows 11 experience. That doesn't exist outside of Microsoft Azure. They have to run on servers outside of that. So when you run on Amazon, you run on Google, you don't get that same experience. And that's a big deal. So we like to use Microsoft for that reason alone. That doesn't mean you can't use other platforms. Again, multi-cloud is a thing, but just for small and medium enterprises, it just doesn't make sense. It makes more sense to standardize on one cloud that can deliver everything that you need and works together. So that interoperability is still important, but there are just distinct pricing advantages to going with Azure. Number 5 is a little different. It's competitive advantage. And for your business, if you migrate to any cloud and you're not dealing with on-site hardware anymore, we feel like that's a competitive advantage for your business because you don't have to worry about a server dying. If your business loses power, for the most part, you can still work outside of that. Now, obviously, manufacturing is a little different, but if you're a services industry or somebody that can work remote, you're not worried about that. You're putting that responsibility on Microsoft or Google or Amazon, wherever you choose to host. For us, because of everything else that works together, so the top 4, so we have interoperability, scalability, security, and pricing advantages, we feel like that just gives Microsoft a competitive advantage. And it gives you, as the customer, the competitive advantage. You can use so many tools between Microsoft 365 and Azure Virtual Desktop. You can use OneDrive, you can use SharePoint, you can use Teams, all inside of that. There's just so much to it that we feel like it just gives them a competitive advantage over the other clouds for that use case and for you as a business. So if you're looking at a server upgrade, it doesn't make sense to buy servers. It doesn't make sense to buy 10 servers. It doesn't make sense to buy a bunch of hypervisors and throw them in a data center and pay those costs when you can just transfer that over to Microsoft and leverage their ecosystem to do that for you. And that way, when you go through a hardware refresh, you're not buying new hardware. That's their responsibility. And if you ever want to upgrade, you don't have to worry about that. If you want to scale your business, you don't have to worry about that. It's a competitive advantage to being able to just spin up a bunch of virtual machines, spin up a bunch of desktops when you need to expand, or you can pull back a little bit when you need to contract. So that's a distinct advantage that Microsoft has. So there you have it. That's why we feel that Microsoft has a competitive advantage over the other providers. One thing I didn't talk about is private, and there are some advantages to private cloud. You can own the hardware if you want. You can use their hardware. They are going to be responsible for it. Maybe there's a way that you can have better performance because maybe it's in your local city and they do some internet stuff. But for the most part, there's still other advantages with the licensing and Azure Virtual Desktop and stuff that just makes more sense doing it in Azure. But that doesn't mean it's right for you. If you want to use AWS, if you want to use Google, that's great. If you feel that that's better for your business, that's great. We can have that conversation. Actually, I encourage that conversation. If you think one of them is better, drop a comment down below. Let's start the conversation. Let's have that. But I hope this video was informative for you. I hope it opened up maybe some questions in your mind that we can talk about and have a conversation. So until next time, stay cyber safe.